Hey everyone, and welcome to the Beyond Acting series. Today, we're talking with set designers to learn more about their job and process. Let's meet the Zoom panel.
Hi, my name is Liz, and I am a set designer.
Hello, my name is Kirk, and I am a set designer.
Hi, my name is Sarah Fabian, and I am a set designer.
Hello, my name is Max, and I'm a set designer.
That last one seemed a bit excessive, but it's great to have you all here today. Let's get right into it with the first question. What does it mean to you to be a set designer? Let's start with Sarah.
So a set designer is in charge of creating the physical world of the play.
Set designer is responsible for the scenic elements that are on stage.
To bring a story to life.
Set design is the chance to help create the physical world of the play, providing a space for the actors to help find their characters.
What does the space that the show lives in, what does that look like on stage and occasionally in the audience as well?
It's often the first impression that the audience gets. It's kind of the framework on which the story unfolds.
Figure out how to make that look, colors, textures, things like that.
A set designer is sort of a creator of worlds.
Well, now that we know generally what a set designer does, how about a more in-depth description of what the job entails? Let's go from the time you accept the offer all the way to the time the contract is finished. What's your process like? Liz, let's start with you this time.
Once I know that I'm going to design a set for a theater, they will provide me with a copy of the script and I will read it.
First read the play, which is often followed by 2 additional reads. The first one is I always like to go for the audience reaction of it. I'd like to do a second read to get more familiar, and then a third read to start making some choices.
Start by reading the script, usually several times. I try to enjoy myself the first time. Doesn't always happen, depends on the show.
When I get an offer, go ahead and read the play. I do analyze the play and figure out what's important to me. My opinion matters also.
Have some of my own ideas of what I think the play is about, what I think the play should look like. I'll think about time period, color palette, and shapes.
But then I break down the needs of the show. I look at the locations. I think about the entrances and exits, furniture needs.
Once I have all of those ideas, then it's time to talk to the director and try and bring our visions together.
Kind of just tossing ideas around, talking about story, finding out what's important to them.
The other thing that I like to have often is an inspirational piece. So maybe it's a painting, maybe it's music, maybe it's a picture, just something that has an essence to it of what the play feels like to me.
The next phase I move on to is research. I'm usually looking for things that are the time period, the style, quite often the playwright. I look at the characters and then I just kind of want to understand the feeling, right? What feelings, what evocative responses I have to the show.
It's a lot of doing visual research. It could be anything from going into my archive of when I read this play, I thought of this image that I saw 5 years ago. Or it could be I went for a walk yesterday and I took a really cool picture and I want to use that because it made me think of the play.
I tend to start with a ground plan. I really like movement through, set design is a 3-dimensional space.
Trying to figure out traffic patterns, the overall movement of the set, kind of as it progresses through the show. And so then once I start to figure out exactly where everything's going, then I'll start to do some initial sketches to show the director and everyone else kind of where those ideas are headed.
Then I move into sketching. Sketching I don't normally show directors. It's more of a personal thing for myself as I explore what the world looks like and feels like to me. In terms of communicating with directors, I like to move straight to models.
Do usually some sketches, very, very simple stuff up front about what it looks like. But I spend the majority of my time 3D modeling. I work in a program called 3D Studio Max, a lot of gaming software. And I tend to just this is what it looks like, get it off to people to have that conversation to see what works, what doesn't work.
We get connected into everyone. And Essentially, it's a lot of talking about the play, talking about the story. Why do we want to tell the story? What's important? Even though my job is to create the physical world, my job is ultimately to help support the story through scenery.
Once I have all of that together and I've made a ground plan, I do what are called mood sketches. And so these are just quick little drawings with a little bit of paint and a little bit of color that you can send to the director, get your drawings approved. Do your technical drawings, which go to the shop.
I tend to go into more detailed sketches, either do 3D renderings or kind of create some kind of paper model, which is like the initial model, like it's a basic version. And then after that, it moves on to the final model, which is full in color, making sure all the details are there.
There's weeks and weeks, me tweaking it, changing it, shifting colors, working along that. I quite often draft, do some elevations of the show simultaneously, so I save time in that next phase, which is very important to me.
We'll be refining those decisions, picking out colors, textures, fabrics, whatever it may be, finishings.
Present to the cast so they can understand the world that they're kind of going to live in, where the show's going to develop, where their characters are going to develop.
And then I guess I spend about 100 hours generally drafting. That's a sick feeling sometimes, but I love it. And then I send that off to the team to build. And moving from there, I spend the next 2 months probably doing paint elevations, things, what it looks like, what I want to paint it like. And then any prop drawings that are different than find a chair. I don't draw the chairs.
So once the drawings are to the shop approves them. Then they start the build.
And then it's a lot of answering questions. So it's kind of nonstop. You got stage managers with questions. You got the props and the paints people. The director needs to know things, kind of pop into rehearsal from time to time.
And I'm usually out of town, out of state. And 1 week that I go in and I do notes and anything that I wanted to build on my own or paint on my own.
And then the set is finally built. Now it's time to paint it.
And we're like literally installing it and doing all of the finishing features. And then we're teching it.
I like to attend Tech Week usually initially to make sure that the set's being used optimally, kind of making sure that things are flowing the way that I had intended in my brain, making sure that everybody understands how it works safely.
As a set designer, you're sitting in the audience. If you have moving parts, if there's multiple sets and things have to move on stage and things have to move off stage, you're watching to make sure that all of that goes as according to plan and to problem solve. That's really your job when you're in tech rehearsal.
Putting it all together, opening night, and I fly out the next morning.
And then it's hands off. No changes should occur after opening night because that should be the same show every time. Once you get to opening night, that's it. You're done.
You get through tech rehearsal and the show opens and then you drink champagne sometimes.
Sometimes. I'd say every time. Anyway, with the process in mind, on to question number 2. What is the time frame of commitment like for a set designer? Let's start with Kirk this time.
Quite often the idea is like, hey, we want you to design next season's probably a year out. The idea of the offer letter, those people are always late to begin with, but the offer comes about 6 to 9 months before opening.
So the time frame is, again, it's really malleable. You'll find the longer you work in this business, the more different theaters work.
Timeline, it varies depending on the show and the situation.
What I've encountered for set designs, the offer comes usually about a year and a half out.
Rehearsals are about 8 weeks. So their production calendar is usually 16. So I'll meet with them 16 weeks before the show opens with all of my drawings.
The shortest amount of time I've had from offer to opening was probably 3 months. That might be like a really small storefront, so you have a limited budget. There's just not a lot of time.
Once I've agreed to do the show, I'll step out and talk to the director. That kind of happens a couple weeks later.
I start the process generally somewhere around 6 months before. Directors tend to want to speak to set designers first. That's the one thing that they're like, I know I have to walk on something. Yeah, we're wearing clothes, but I know I got to walk, so I want to know what that looks like.
The longest is a year and a half. The ones that are like a year and a half are much larger theaters and or bigger productions like an opera.
And we'll meet with the group. I'll share those. Then we have usually another 3 to 4 weeks to start solidifying the ground plan, making sure everything's exactly where it needs to be.
Probably about 3 months go back and forth with different meetings, getting everyone together, especially when you're around the country. Not always easy. Just seeing what everyone needs.
I'll do final presentations about 9 weeks before the show opens.
And then after that, generally a 4 to 6 week build process where everything's put together and assembled before load-in week, which is usually about a week or two before tech.
They will have rehearsals up until a week before the show opens, and then they go into the space.
Get everything loaded in, set up and organized exactly the way you want it. And then once it's set, you begin tech rehearsals, and then sometimes previews, depending on the company. And that's where you kind of bring an audience in for the first time, introducing that last element of the audience to the show.
But I'm on site for about 10 days, 2 weeks, and that usually wraps it up, and I see the opening.
But generally by that point, you've moved on to your next design.
And then I read the notes for the next 3 months while it's running and smile and hope that everyone that's there does the little fixes. But I'm usually out of the picture after opening night.
Seems like opening night is the goal for a set designer. Let's jump to the next question. When you think of all the aspects of the job, what would you say is the best part about being a set designer?
Oh, it's hard to pick one thing about what I love about my job.
So there are two aspects to theater that I really like.
I mean, I think you have to love all of it, to be frank.
Now, the part of it that I really like, and it actually is kind of an Achilles heel for me, is I love visual research.
I really enjoy building models. That's sort of like, it's just tiny and detailed.
And when I was in college, we went into the library and got stacks and stacks of books, and you would like lay under a table somewhere and just page through all of them while you're supposed to be writing your term paper that you then didn't get done. But I mean, it's just really a vortex that sucks me in. I love research.
The coolest thing to me about being a set designer is having so many people commit so much time and often thousands of dollars to just physically creating something that I was paid to dream up.
Favorite part I have is just walking into the shop and seeing everyone bringing my work to fruition, and then getting to know and developing a shorthand and challenging each other and literally just enjoying life together while we work.
I just had a bunch of ideas and I put those on paper. I kind of vomited them out onto paper, and then an entire team of people sprung to action, building that and painting it and creating it and spending money to purchase all of it. And to me, that's an astounding thing.
The people are the best part of the job. It's my favorite part is working with fellow artists. I always laugh. I'm like, as a set designer, I'm kind of an introvert. I work by myself in the space. It's just this communal energy that is so exciting. So I get to use the best of both worlds.
I think the most magical moment would probably be the first day of dress, like the first dress, because that's usually when we have obviously all the costumes, and that's when you really get to see everything come together that you've been working months or maybe a year or more on.
I like change, good, bad, or indifferent. When you start the process at 16 weeks before opening, it's done in 16 weeks. It turns over. You never need to be bored or stuck. And I love that. I love that aspect of it.
With a musical though, I love Wandel Probe. Wandel Probe is essentially when the actors are walking through the motions of the entire production while they play. It's just a really magical experience.
It's a great job.
Sounds great, but let's not sugarcoat it. If that's the best part, then what would you say is the worst part about being a set designer?
The worst part of set design for me is
I have to say the worst part of the job is my favorite part of the job, but that is the drafting phase.
Okay, so the worst part of my job, I would say, is when someone doesn't show up.
The worst aspect for me is probably all the emails. It's constant, nonstop emails.
I don't know that I'm going to say I don't hate it every time, but sometimes I do. The last minute changes.
I will do everything I can in my house to clean it. I will do laundry. I will do all the dishes. I will do them again because I do not want to start this process that's going to take hundreds of hours.
Initially you're talking to the director, contract stuff figured out with the artistic director, and explaining things to the stage manager so they know where stuff is. Costume designer to make sure your colors are on. To the lighting designer to make sure you're not blocking things.
And when I mean not show up, it doesn't mean physically showing up. I mean, it means dropping the ball on what they were supposed to do. That is very stressful.
Sometimes you've already put in so many, you're already at like 60, 70 hours a week, and then you get a note.
Because by the time my drafting is out, I'm already on another show. I'm making decisions on something else. So I want everything to be understood, and I want to be known as that designer that's like, well, as soon as we got his drafting, we'll just see him when he shows up.
And then you kind of move into the build. So you're kind of talking to technical directors and you're answering questions there. At rehearsal, they have questions. It's usually just a lot of questions all the way through the process, which usually amounts to just answering a lot of emails.
You have to figure out when you can be in the space to do that, and it's usually late. I guess I don't like being up late so much anymore.
For the most part, it doesn't really happen because everyone that does theater knows how interlaced that process is.
Having to constantly give information and making sure that everyone's informed, it's an absolutely necessary part of the process, but sometimes it can be overwhelming, especially if it's a very complex show.
Theater is so interconnected, and if someone doesn't do their job, it becomes that much harder for everyone else.
Getting into it, it's a nightmare. But once you're in it, it's a dream.
A dream and a nightmare. Sounds about right. So if you're not scared away yet by the worst part of the job, let's hear some of the skills that might be helpful for a young aspiring set designer. This could be physically, mentally, or emotionally. What skills would help make a good set designer?
I think when it comes to skills, and when I think about skills of people that I want to hire or I want to work with, I want the good attitude skill first.
People who maybe initially took an interest in architecture or construction might really like set design.
The creativity part is what I hope they come with.
Be able to use your imagination, because a lot of scripts often have sort of descriptions of what things should look like, but it doesn't mean it has to be that.
It's helpful to be strong. I spent many years lifting and hauling scenery.
Definitely somebody who loves intricacy and detail.
And not feel tied down to what was done before.
And if you can keep your calm in the middle of a storm.
I think having art skills is very helpful. Understanding color, understanding texture.
Just have a positive idea and outlook. Strong work ethic. I love people who work hard and want to do better and want to do good by the production.
If you're that person who everything is falling apart and you can just not get upset, that is endlessly useful in this business in particular. Really useful because things always go wrong.
The biggest thing I would say would be communication. Being able to communicate in all different ways.
People skills, people have questions. So making sure that you're answering them in a timely manner, you're being positive.
You have to find a way to communicate your ideas and be able to be receptive to how people receive information.
Communicate ideas because we don't all learn the same. We don't all hear the same. And so to have the basic level tools, anyone can take a class. You don't know how to draft? Go on the World Wide Web and find a video.
Being able to take a critique, if you're going to do anything in theater, you got to have a little bit of a thick skin.
Patience. And just the kindergarten checklist, the ability to work well with others.
Really have to try to play well with others, collaborate well. Theater is not a solo art form.
I mean, you just have to. And you have to be mature about it and remember that criticism is criticism in, criticism out. So listen, because you don't have to take all of the criticism and apply it.
We work too many hours for too little pay to not enjoy it.
That's somebody who would really like set design.
Let's change gears and do something a little more fun. Seeing that every job in theater is different, what is something that you hate doing, but you love because you know you will never have to do that thing as a set designer?
I love that I will never have to do whatever the paperwork is that they do for lighting. Oh, like never, 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 never.
Oh, yes. The things that I will never have to do quite often are the things that plug in.
Yeah, I pretty much don't have to touch a light unless it's a practical light in the design, like a lamp.
Don't have to do anything electrical or signal oriented.
I don't have to wear black clothes. Not that I don't enjoy it, I'm wearing it right now, but I don't have to. I have choices that I get to make.
Make your cables look really neat. I can drop gels, I can focus, but that paperwork, done.
You often don't have to work with fabric, which is great. I mean, yeah, maybe you have curtains here, a tablecloth there, but you're not like stitching and sewing and assembling things out of fabric.
I don't like doing magic sheets, cue sheets, and I don't like touching light boards, ever, if I can avoid it.
I have to be that person that's stuck behind a machine, stuck behind a console. I just don't have to do that.
And that is a beautiful thing. Now, let's think about who else on the team makes your life a little easier or better. Who would you say it's a good idea to be friends with on the production team? Basically, whose work could really help or really hurt your design?
Everyone.
As a set designer, you work with a lot of different people.
You got to get along with everyone. There's nobody that you can't get along with. It's really miserable when you have to work with somebody that you can't get along with.
I think it's good to be friends with everybody, but I think the start of it all is you got to be great friends with the director because they're the ones that are going to get you your next job.
The director, I think everybody has to deal with the director, and it's best to get along with the director.
The technical director, the lighting designer, definitely.
Technical director, the person who's building the thing. If you are lucky enough to have a scenic painter, you want to be nice to them, mainly because you're also giving them notes.
Within 3 days, I will have taken every carpenter, prop person, or painter out for lunch because they're the people that are gonna give you the extra 5 minutes, a little bit more attention, be wanting to do that extra mile on any project because they know it looks good at the end.
The other person I'd say is definitely the stage manager. Their job can be rough. It's a lot of commitment, and not a lot of people understand all the work and time that goes into it and just the responsibility involved. So that's definitely somebody that you just want to keep in good spirits because they are the backbone of the show.
And I honestly think the long-lasting friendships that I have and working relationship I have are with the carpenters that get talked to about art, that don't always want to or don't always think about it, but become part of making it beautiful.
But for the most part, I think you should just be pleasant. Be the person you would want to work with.
That's solid advice. So what about if someone likes the idea of set design, but maybe wants to consider a field that is maybe more technical or less technical than set design? Or maybe something requiring more or less art skills? What other positions might be a good fit for someone considering set design, but wants to try something else?
So if you like certain aspects of set design, but don't want to be a set designer, one of the jobs that I would recommend maybe is props.
Maybe paint charge, props master, projections designer. Those are all kind of visual oriented, but in kind of different ways.
You probably might also like painting and or propping your own shows.
Because it encompasses a lot of the same. One, research. If you're like me and you like to research, props is all about researching.
Definitely explore technical direction.
I think that the first and foremost, I would want to be a prop person and have been a prop person. As I was aspiring to become a set designer, I often worked in props because I knew how to build a little bit. I knew enough painting to get me by. I knew that I didn't have to make all of the decisions. Basically, I was a hunter and gatherer. I was able to just search and find things that aligned with the world and didn't actually have to come up with the concepts.
It's a little bit of a different language, costumes, but if you like scenery, you could probably also do costumes as well.
Props is great because it's a lot more detail oriented while still kind of doing set. Paint is great because you can really dive into the specifics of what the set looks like. Projections is great because you're kind of shaping worlds. So those are kind of decent possibilities as well.
Those are all great answers. Now, on a completely unrelated note, theater is often a tax-deductible field, both for the purchases for a job, but also for the artist doing the job. Tell us the coolest or most bizarre tax-deductible experience that you've ever had as a set designer.
The coolest / weirdest thing that I've ever been able to get taxes deducted on would be creepy antique dolls.
That would probably be the time that I went to Goodwill with $100 and just got to go through and buy as many toys and stuffed animals as I could. And I ended up with like bags and bags. My entire back seat and trunk were just filled with stuffed animals.
Okay, they're not actually creepy, but they're antique, like Victorian style porcelain dolls that we used in a production at Filament Theater for The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. And we had this like doll shop display of all of these dolls. Yeah, it was really weird. And I didn't have to pay taxes on it.
I don't know that it's weird, but I deduct my car every year because I haul paint, I haul furniture.
I think the coolest thing that I have ever written off for my taxes was when I was designing a show called The Violet of Montmartre, and I was simultaneously taking a trip to Paris, France. And so everything for those 3 days that I took side trips and did photos and was doing primary research in the city in which it took place, yeah, all of that got to count. Because I'm working there, I'm eating there, I'm talking about the show there, and all of that gets wrapped right into research.
A lot of the things that, you just use in life and it's there already, it's a tax deduction because I need it to do my job.
And definitely some great takeaways from that little tidbit. What about your personal inspiration? What was the initial spark that got you into theater or into your field in general? Or what or who inspired you to be a set designer?
So there's 2 things really that really inspired me to go into set design. One would be my parents. They took us to see plays from a very young age, and so I've just been exposed to theater a lot as an audience member, and I always was very fascinated by the magic of theater because it happens live and it's different every single time.
My teachers were the ones that inspired me to get into theater. I started as an actor in kindergarten. I was a toy soldier, and I loved playing and exploring and memorizing for some reason. Gravitated toward design in high school and undergrad because I realized that they always wanted me to come and help build, because I knew how to build things. And it was my father who had a wood shop that I was out there all the time and made him let me play and let me build things and let me help and let me refinish and stain. And I didn't realize that not everyone had that skill. I mean, I had just been doing that since I was little. So I think that I turned the play, the fun, and the idea of the skills that I had growing up, and I put them all together. I'm like, well, you should just be a designer, and then you never have to memorize lines again.
When I was 14, I started working at a community theater and I acted a lot, and the set designer was kind of the person that took me under their wing as I kind of volunteered to help build sets and kind of showed me how to do it. Josh Erickson, wonderful set designer, a really great artist, and just really fun to work with.
But the thing that really was like, that's what I want to do with my life, would be seeing the Broadway tour of The Lion King. I would have been in like middle school age, and I saw The Lion King in Toronto, and my mind was blown. And I was like, what is this? I had never really seen a musical of that scale. And the craftsmanship of that show, which I didn't fully grasp at the time. Now I do understand like the intricacies of that process. But at the time, I just was like, there's puppets, there's animals leaping, there's, the African sun is like rising over the horizon with the little silk fluttering. I was just completely blown away by that. And I was like, that's what I want to do.
Just realizing that there was no real correct answer for it, that, maybe I saw something on Broadway before, a clip of something on Broadway, but seeing a design that's come to fruition based on the space and the people involved and everything in that regard kind of was just a really interesting moment for me. And it kind of just took me in a different direction in my understanding of life. And that's kind of where I got started with set design.
In undergrad, breadth of knowledge course is what they used to call them, just a basic liberal arts. And I had taken a lot of photography and visual art courses, and I had never taken any music courses. So I decided that I would take a course in opera. And we went to the Lyric in Chicago, and I saw Mephistopheles. And at the end of Mephistopheles, he's whistling and yelling, and they're carrying the devil back off to hell in his pink suit. It was so beautiful. And then all the angels on these 3 tiers of balconies lean forward and throw out rose petals. And it all comes fluttering it down. And of course, they added more rose petals from the catwalks. And so all these petals are falling, and the light is golden, and just everything about it was, I was like, I want to do that. I want to make that happen. Like I have a feeling about that, and I want to have other people have that feeling, and I want to be part of that.
Very cool. I always love hearing what inspired an artist to pursue the path they chose. Thinking toward the future though, for our last question, are there any dream projects that you have been desperately wanting to design? Maybe a show or even a different art form that you've been dying to get involved with? Or we can go the opposite direction. Are there any shows that you never want to do again?
I guess, honestly, I'm so desensitized to the idea of the dream project because I never get to choose my project. I'm a set designer. I'm picked because they love my interiors. Or, isn't that great? He really did that great outdoor. I did ballrooms for decades. I just loved, and I guess I did it well. But I guess the dreamiest is locations. Right now, since I live in Michigan, I dream for a job in Texas every January. I dream for a job abroad when I have time to go. I think that I like to dream about where do I get to work, and the people that I get to work with. I think that is the greatest thing because I've got to see a lot of the world because I was hired for the gig.
When it comes to shows that I really want to do, or my dream show, I feel like I'm living my dream doing shows. So I've never really had a list of shows that I want to do. I'm open to whatever comes my way. There are shows that I don't ever want to do again. And not because they're not good shows, but if you've worked in theater as long as I have, you've done them to death. I never need to do Fiddler on the Roof again. I never need to do Sound of Music ever again.
Dream project, well, my favorite musical is Cabaret, and I have not designed that yet. Cabaret, I would love to design that musical.
Spring Awakening. Spring Awakening was one of my favorites that I saw that I was kind of underwhelmed by the set when I saw it. And I was just really, and again, I get now that, it's a statement, it's an abstract piece. As a kid, I was like, where's all the sets? I just saw Wicked and it had millions. So that was kind of still a show that I've always wanted to do, and just kind of, I've never really gotten a chance to do Spring Awakening, and that's always been kind of a dream.
Wow, I feel exactly the same way. Weird. Well, as we wrap up and wind down, I want to get any final thoughts on being a set designer. Any last minute takeaways or things we didn't get to cover? Your closing statements, please.
I guess that the thing about being a set designer, first and foremost, that is the difficult thing, is since you are usually the first to the table with the director, is making sure that you don't move too far, too fast, right, with the rest of your design team. The one thing that I always got my hands slapped by costume designers was when I put my cute little figure into the model or into a rendering, and they're like, "Why did you dress them?" I'm like, well, it's kind of gross to have naked people running around my model, but I have to show scale. And so I think it's really about balancing the relationship that you're going to have with the individual. Some want you to choose colors. Some want you to do that so that they can react. It's understanding the desire of the rest of the team, I think, that really want to come in and how much they want. So I guess it's really about pacing yourself with the people around you to make it really cool.
Set design is the chance to take the real world and to morph it physically into a new place, whether you change the scale or change the color, or change the size, or reinvent everything about it. It's just reshaping the world for the best way to tell the story. And your imagination is the only thing that can limit you in that regard. Creating a set is about more than just like figuring out what flats and platforms there are. It's about building a playground for the actors to find their characters in. And really it's about creating a home for those characters to live in. It's being an architect for imaginary people.
One thing that I think is important is to not lose sight of why theater is important and the impact it can have, not only on like communities, but for individual people. I feel like if I didn't, for whatever reason, didn't get to go see The Lion King, maybe I wouldn't have ended up where I am. And to be honest, like when I originally started out on my path, I felt like I needed to do something that was going to make money, which is funny. And so when I started college, I actually was a biochemistry pre-med student. And it was about a couple weeks into it when I was thinking about my life. This is not exciting. I don't feel passionate about this. And so, I think when I made the decision to call home, so I'm not going to be a doctor, I'm going to do theater. It was terrifying, but my parents were really supportive. And I'm glad that I made that choice. Even if you don't want to do theater as a career, there's so many wonderful things you learn from it that can help you in other professions.
I have often stood backstage or in other places that the public, that the audience never sees, and have felt great privilege. I don't know, I can stand there and be like, I am watching these people paint this drop and it's in the afternoon, and I know this drop is going to be going into the theater in 2 weeks, and nobody knows, nobody else is seeing all these people stand here with these bamboo canes and using the techniques. There's like all these secrets that I get to know. It's a privilege. And I just remember standing backstage and looking between the legs and watching actresses in their dance costumes leisurely sort of slouch and talk as they're leaning on the props box, and chatting, and the lights are going and it's on the cinder block of the back wall. And that is a perspective that not everybody gets. And it just feels special. It's special.
Amazing. That's perfect. Well, that's about it. I want to thank you all for being here today and for taking the time to answer our questions in such detail. I want to thank you all for watching. Till next time, thanks y'all.